The mess hall was alive with the hum of early morning chaos. The fluorescent lights glinted off stainless steel trays as recruits maneuvered between tables, some joking loudly, others trying to find a quiet corner to eat. The scent of scrambled eggs and burnt coffee hung heavy in the air, mingling with the sharper tang of military-grade disinfectant. Among the crowd, 3 young male recruits, the type who wore arrogance like a second uniform, noticed a new face. She was small, lean, and quiet, carrying her tray with a subtle precision that immediately set her apart. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her uniform was immaculate, every fold crisp, every insignia perfectly aligned. She didn't look like someone who would draw attention, and yet something about her presence, calm, measured, almost predatory in its stillness, made them pause, momentarily puzzled. "Look at her," muttered the tallest of the 3, a smirk stretching across his face. "She looks fragile." "Fragile?" the second one laughed, loud and harsh. "We can fix that." The tallest nudged him, eyes glinting with mischief. "Yeah, let's see how she handles herself. I bet she's never been tested." They exchanged sly grins and began to move toward her, nudging each other as if the moment were a private joke. She hadn't noticed yet, too focused on arranging her tray and scanning for a table that was both empty and unobstructed. She moved with the rhythm of someone trained to observe, and each step was deliberate. The first recruit reached for her arm as she stepped toward an empty booth. She pivoted subtly, almost as if she'd anticipated it, her hand brushing lightly against his wrist. Not hard, not threatening, but enough to make him stumble slightly. The second recruit leaned in from the side, blocking her path. The third closed the rear, cutting off any possibility of retreat. "Hey, looks like someone's trying to hide in the corner," the tallest said, voice dripping with mockery. "You think you're too good to talk to us?" She finally looked up. Her dark eyes were sharp and unflinching. There was no fear in them, no hesitation, just a steady calm that made the 3 men exchange uneasy glances. It was the kind of look that belonged to someone who had been in situations far beyond anything they could imagine, someone who had survived impossible odds and come out unscathed. The tallest recruit chuckled nervously. "Relax, we're just messing with you." She tilted her head slightly, and her lips curved into the faintest smirk, not amused, not threatening, but a quiet acknowledgement that she saw them clearly, saw exactly what they were trying to do. It made the second recruit shift on his feet, suddenly aware that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. "Easy?" she said softly, almost to herself, though loud enough for the first recruit to hear. Her voice was calm, unshaken, carrying an edge that none of them expected. The third recruit stepped closer, assuming bravado would win the day. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" She exhaled slowly, letting her eyes sweep the room. Every other recruit, every soldier in the hall had stopped what they were doing to watch. Subconsciously, people knew something was about to happen. The air thickened with anticipation, and the subtle tension between the 3 men and the woman became palpable. Then she moved. Not a rush, not a lunge, but a shift of weight, a pivot of her torso. The first recruit reached out and she sidestepped, gently guiding his hand past her body with a movement so fluid it looked like dance. He stumbled forward into the edge of the table. A tray clattered to the floor, eggs and toast scattering like shrapnel. The hall erupted into murmurs, some stifled gasps, others the soft clicks of phones as onlookers instinctively began to record. The second recruit lunged to block her exit, but she didn't fight. She simply twisted her body, using his momentum against him, and he slammed into a chair with a thud. Chairs scraped the floor, silverware rattled. Patrons froze mid-bite, unsure whether to intervene or watch. The third recruit froze in place, eyes wide. This was no ordinary training exercise. This was not a soldier fresh out of basic. Every detail, her posture, her balance, the economy of her movements screamed elite-level training. The room's chatter evaporated into silence as the recruits' earlier bravado began to crumble. "You're what?" the third stammered, disbelief lacing his voice. Her gaze swept over them, calm yet piercing. A quiet warning delivered without a word: underestimate me, and it will cost you. She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile, enough to make the first recruit's stomach churn. Relax, she said again, voice even and controlled. But this time it wasn't reassurance, it was a challenge. The three men took a collective step back, suddenly aware of just how outmatched they were. Their earlier laughter and arrogance seemed foolish now, petty in comparison to the presence of someone who could neutralize all three in seconds if she chose. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The sheer control in her posture, the subtle power radiating from her every movement, filled the hall with tension so thick it was almost tangible. Recruits and diners alike watched, mesmerized. They had expected intimidation. What they got was mastery. The first recruit mumbled under his breath, barely audible, She's a seal." The second and third exchanged stunned looks. The quiet woman in the mess hall, the one they tried to trap, was someone far beyond their comprehension. Their fear mingled with awe. They realized too late that they had been amateurs testing a master. She adjusted her tray, picked up the scattered eggs without breaking stride, and walked toward an empty table, her movements unhurried, composed, as if nothing had happened. Yet the echo of her dominance lingered in the mess hall like a shadow, leaving the three recruits frozen, humiliated, and wide-eyed with disbelief. Every other recruit whispered among themselves, phones recording, hearts racing. In under a minute, a small, unassuming woman had transformed a routine breakfast into a spectacle of skill, control, and undeniable authority. The three men stared after her, shaken and humbled. They didn't know who she was, but they knew one thing: underestimating her had been the biggest mistake of their lives. And as she sat down, calm and collected, a faint smile crossed her lips, because the real test was just beginning. The mess hall still buzzed with the low murmur of conversation, though it was different now, less casual, more charged. Whispers followed the quiet, unassuming woman as she moved to a table in the corner, tray in hand. She placed her breakfast down with deliberate care, each motion precise, almost ritualistic, as if to remind anyone watching that she was in complete control of herself and her environment. The three recruits lingered nearby, pretending to eat, though no one would have mistaken their jittery movements for relaxation. Their earlier bravado had evaporated in the face of a presence that was both commanding and utterly composed. Every glance they stole at her was laced with a mixture of fear, awe, and disbelief. "She's not normal," muttered the tallest recruit, voice low, barely audible over the ambient noise of clattering trays. "Yeah," said the second, his hand trembling slightly as he sipped his coffee. "I mean, did you see how she moved? That wasn't just fast, it was surgical." The third recruit, youngest and cockiest, leaned back in his chair, though his face betrayed his uncertainty. "I don't know what you're talking about. She's just lucky." Luck. The word made the first two snort quietly, though even their attempts at humor were hollow. Deep down, they knew what they had witnessed was skill, years of elite training condensed into a single, devastating display, and luck had nothing to do with it. She ate quietly, eyes scanning the room as if aware of every detail, every recruit, every tray, every potential threat. Nothing escaped her. The three men couldn't help but notice the subtle way her muscles shifted under her uniform, the controlled way she held her hands, the rhythm of her breathing. It was as though she were already preparing for situations they couldn't even imagine. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The mess hall had regained a semblance of normalcy, but the tension lingered like smoke in the air. Other recruits whispered among themselves, sharing theories about her identity. Some guessed instructor, others assumed decorated combat veteran. No one dared approach her. The aura of control she radiated made even the most confident soldier hesitant. Finally, the third recruit, unable to contain his curiosity or his bruised ego, spoke aloud. "Hey, what are you? I mean." His voice faltered, unsure how to phrase what he already knew but couldn't accept. She looked up slowly, eyes meeting his. There was no anger, no malice, only calm, measured observation. Her voice was soft but authoritative. "I'm someone who doesn't take kindly to being cornered." The words hit like a jolt. He swallowed, realizing he had not only underestimated her but also revealed his lack of self-awareness. His two companions shifted uneasily, suddenly aware of the truth in her statement. She set her tray aside and stood, the room falling silent once more. Patrons instinctively stepped back, sensing the gravity of what was about to unfold. Her gaze swept over the three men who had tried to intimidate her, and without a word she closed the distance between them. Her stride was calm, deliberate, and every inch of her movement screamed authority and confidence. The tallest recruit tried to stand his ground. "Look, we didn't mean." She didn't allow him to finish. With a subtle pivot and a controlled movement that would have taken most men by surprise, she pressed him against the edge of a table, applying just enough force to unbalance him without causing real harm. The suddenness of it made him gasp, his earlier arrogance crumbling instantly. The second recruit instinctively stepped forward, trying to intervene, only to be sidestepped so fluidly that he stumbled past her, nearly colliding with a chair. She barely moved her center of gravity, yet every action was precise, controlled, and devastatingly efficient. The third recruit, still in disbelief, finally murmured the words that none of them had dared to say aloud. "She's a seal." The confirmation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Every whisper, every gaze, every sense in the room acknowledged it. This was not an ordinary soldier. This was someone forged through extreme discipline, survival, and elite combat training. She allowed herself a faint smile, not mocking, not triumphant, but simply acknowledging the truth. Then, just as suddenly as the tension had escalated, she released the first recruit, letting him stumble back into his chair. He sat frozen, staring at her in awe, trying to process the realization of what had just occurred. The mess hall, now fully attentive, held its collective breath. Some recruits fumbled with trays, others simply watched, unable to divert their gaze from the woman who had turned an ordinary breakfast into a spectacle of skill and authority. Phones were raised cautiously, though many hesitated, fearing the consequences of recording someone so obviously capable. For a few moments, silence reigned. Then, almost imperceptibly, she spoke again. "Next time you test someone, remember, perception is a dangerous thing." Her tone carried weight beyond her years, a quiet but unmistakable warning that underestimating her was not an option. The three recruits exchanged panicked glances. The tallest muttered under his breath, We messed up." "Yes," said the second. "Yeah, we really did." The youngest, still stunned, finally whispered, "I don't think we should ever talk to her again." She turned back to her tray, picking at her eggs with deliberate calm. She wasn't done, not yet. Every movement was controlled, every action calculated. To onlookers, she was eating breakfast. To the three recruits, she was delivering a lesson they would never forget. Even as she chewed, her eyes scanned the room, noting the subtle shifts of behavior among the other soldiers. She cataloged potential threats, allies, and weaknesses with the same precision she had applied in every combat operation she had survived. It was a skill born from years of life-or-death situations, the kind of experience the three recruits could not begin to fathom. Hours passed in mere minutes for them. Their minds raced, replaying the moments over and over. How could one person neutralize three grown men without effort? How could someone so quiet, so unassuming, be capable of such control? Unbeknownst to the three recruits, the woman wasn't focused on their fear. She was already assessing what came next. The mess hall was just the beginning. She had other responsibilities, missions to prepare for, and subtle dangers to anticipate. Her calm demeanor masked the storm of calculations running through her mind. Every action, every glance, every subtle shift in body weight was part of a larger plan, one designed to keep herself, and those around her, safe in unpredictable environments. The three recruits, meanwhile, were frozen in a mixture of fear and admiration. Their earlier arrogance had been stripped away in less than a minute. The quiet woman, small and seemingly fragile, had demonstrated a mastery of physical skill and psychological control that left them utterly unprepared to respond. They had learned their lesson too late, and the weight of that realization pressed on them like a leaden weight in their chests. Finally, she stood, gathering her tray with deliberate slowness, as if savoring the effect she had on the room. Every eye followed her movements, captivated by the quiet power she radiated. Without a word, she walked toward the door, leaving the three recruits to absorb the gravity of their mistake. The tallest whispered hoarsely, We need to find out who she really is." She paused briefly at the door, glancing over her shoulder with a faint, knowing smile. The three recruits had no idea that this encounter was only the beginning. What came next would challenge them in ways they could not yet imagine, and she was already several steps ahead. The mess hall had returned to its usual rhythm, trays clattering and recruits chatting, but for the three young men, nothing felt normal anymore. Their earlier bravado had been utterly dismantled, replaced with an uneasy awareness that the quiet woman they had tried to corner was far beyond anything they could comprehend. They sat at their table, shuffling their trays, pretending to eat, though every bite tasted like ash. Each glance toward the corner where she now sat was heavy with a mixture of awe, fear, and disbelief. The smallest one whispered almost to himself, Did she even break a sweat?" "Relax," the tallest replied, though his voice carried little conviction. "Maybe she's just lucky." Luck, the word hung in the air, ridiculous now. They all knew better. The way she moved, the way she had read their intentions, the efficiency with which she had neutralized three men without harming them. It wasn't luck. It was mastery, honed through grueling training, missions most soldiers couldn't even imagine. The woman, meanwhile, had not forgotten them. Her sharp eyes scanned the hall as she ate, noticing every subtle shift in their posture, every nervous glance, every suppressed tremor of fear. She wasn't just watching. She was analyzing, cataloging, preparing. Every action, every glance, every movement was being processed in her mind, the way an elite operator anticipates outcomes before they occur. The youngest recruit, still shaken, muttered, "I can't stop thinking about how fast she." He trailed off, unable to articulate what he had seen. "Don't even try," the tallest muttered. Just don't. We don't know what we're dealing with." At that moment she rose from her seat. Her movement was slow, deliberate, yet every step radiated control and authority. The mess hall fell into an uneasy hush. Diners instinctively made space, sensing the energy shift in the room. She didn't hurry. She didn't need to. The confidence in her stride spoke volumes, an unspoken warning that she could, if she chose, dominate anyone in her path. The three recruits exchanged a terrified glance. Pride, humiliation, and fear battled in their eyes. They had underestimated her, and they knew it. She stopped near their table, calm and composed. "I suggest you think carefully before testing anyone else," she said quietly, her voice carrying an edge of steel beneath its calm exterior. The first recruit, trying to recover some shred of dignity, attempted a joke. "A lesson learned." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing in a subtle calculation, studying their reactions. And then she moved. Before any of them could react, she stepped closer. Her hand shot out with lightning speed, grabbing the tallest recruit's wrist and twisting it behind his back with precision so exact it caused him to yelp in surprise. He stumbled forward, nearly colliding with the table edge. His tray toppled, breakfast spilling across the floor. The mess hall erupted in gasps and startled murmurs. The second recruit lunged instinctively to intervene, but she pivoted, letting his momentum carry him into the side of a chair. The impact sent him tumbling to the ground with a thud, rattling chairs and utensils. Every motion she made was smooth, deliberate, yet devastatingly effective. The room held its collective breath. The youngest recruit froze, eyes wide, heart pounding. He could see now what the others had only suspected: a trained elite, a SEAL, someone whose skill was unmatched. He whispered almost to himself, "Oh God, she's a SEAL." The woman's eyes flicked toward him, and in that brief moment he felt the full weight of her awareness. She could read fear, hesitation, and intention like an open book. One wrong move, and any attempt at retaliation would fail disastrously. She let out a faint, controlled exhale and turned her attention back to the tallest recruit, who was struggling to regain his balance. In a single fluid motion, she brought him down to the ground, her control precise enough to immobilize him without causing injury. The mess hall was silent, all eyes fixed on the display. It wasn't just the physical domination that stunned them. It was the psychological impact. Every movement, every decision, every calculation conveyed authority, experience, and an almost predatory intelligence. She had turned what was supposed to be a harmless prank into a master class of control and composure. The onlookers, some trying to hide their fascination, others too stunned to move, watched in awe. Phones were cautiously raised, but few dared record. The power she radiated was palpable, a magnetic force that drew attention while simultaneously commanding respect. Even the three recruits, bruised and humiliated, understood that this was more than a lesson in skill. It was a demonstration of discipline, mental fortitude, and the consequences of arrogance. Their earlier confidence had been stripped away in under a minute, replaced by a gnawing sense of inadequacy. She released the tallest recruit, letting him slump against the table. He gasped for air, his pride thoroughly dismantled. The second and third sat frozen, unsure whether to flee or stay, caught between fear and fascination. She didn't gloat, didn't mock. Her composure was absolute, almost serene. It was as though she were delivering a message without words: respect or pay the price. Her gaze swept the hall again, noting subtle signs of behavior, calculating potential threats, and assessing the readiness of every soldier in the room. To anyone else, she was just another recruit, quietly finishing her breakfast. To those who had tested her, she was a force of nature. Finally she spoke, her voice low but commanding. "Consider this a lesson. You may have strength, but you lack control, and control is everything." The three recruits swallowed, unable to respond. They knew, with a sinking certainty, that they had crossed a line they were never meant to cross. Humiliation mixed with awe as they processed the truth. This quiet, unassuming woman had just demonstrated abilities that far exceeded their comprehension. She picked up her tray again, carefully gathering her untouched breakfast, and moved toward the exit. Every step was deliberate, every motion controlled. The room seemed to hold its breath as she walked past the three recruits, leaving them to absorb the magnitude of what had just occurred. Even as she disappeared through the doorway, the echoes of her presence lingered. The mess hall had been transformed from a place of casual routine into a theater of skill, control, and psychological mastery. And the three recruits sat frozen, knowing they had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would remain with them for the rest of their military careers. As the door closed behind her, the tallest recruit muttered under his breath, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe, We have no idea what we just unleashed." Little did they know, the encounter in the mess hall was only the beginning. The real challenges, the true tests of skill, would come later, and they would be far more dangerous than anything they could imagine. The mess hall slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though the energy was forever changed. Conversations were quieter, laughter muted, and every glance toward the corner where the woman had claimed her space was tinged with curiosity and caution. She sat composed, her breakfast untouched, her posture calm yet commanding. But in the minds of the three recruits, the memory of what had happened only grew sharper, more vivid, and impossible to ignore. The tallest recruit, still rubbing his bruised wrist, leaned toward the others, whispering, She's not just trained. That was exceptional, surgical." The youngest, cheeks flushed, nodded but didn't speak. He was still staring at the woman, replaying her every motion, every pivot, every movement of her body with a mixture of fear and fascination. Their arrogance had been shattered in less than 60 seconds, leaving only a raw, unfiltered understanding of her superiority. The second recruit muttered, "No, no way, that wasn't just skill. That was, I don't know, elite military-level stuff. She's a SEAL, right?" The words hung in the air, heavier than any command they had been trained to obey. For the first time, they realized the enormity of the miscalculation they had made. They had tried to corner someone who had survived unimaginable trials, someone capable of life-or-death precision, someone who had probably neutralized threats far more dangerous than 3 brash recruits in a mess hall. Meanwhile, the woman remained calm, almost serene. Her eyes swept the room, noting every movement, every posture, every slight change in tension. To the casual observer, she looked like a quiet, contemplative recruit. To those who had tested her, she was a revelation, a reminder of the gap between appearance and reality. Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles as she watched the 3 men whisper to each other, still trying to process what had just happened. She didn't feel the need to gloat. The lesson had already been delivered. She had exposed arrogance, humility, and fear in one fluid display. It was a message of respect, discipline, and the consequences of misjudgment. The tallest recruit leaned back, running a hand over his face. We crossed a line," he admitted, voice low, shaky. "We didn't just make a mistake, we embarrassed ourselves in front of everyone, and her." The youngest swallowed hard. Yeah, and she didn't even yell, didn't even need to. It's like she had already won before we moved. Even now, the recruits were haunted by the efficiency of her movements. Every muscle, every pivot, every subtle shift had been executed with a mastery that made their attempts at intimidation seem laughable. They realized with chilling clarity that she had been fully aware of them the entire time, predicting their actions, countering them with precise control. Whispers rippled across the mess hall. Some recruits speculated she might be a decorated veteran, others guessed an instructor with combat experience. Few had the courage to approach her. Most were content to observe from a safe distance, drawn in by the aura of control she exuded. Finally, one recruit, the tallest, leaned in again, voice barely audible. "Do you think she's really a SEAL?" The other 2 exchanged glances. Fear mingled with awe, forming a cocktail of respect and terror. None of them could speak confidently. The truth was evident, undeniable, and yet somehow beyond their comprehension. She watched them silently for a moment, then allowed herself a slow, deliberate stretch. The fluidity of her movements, the calm precision, and the effortless control were almost hypnotic. It was a demonstration of experience that went far beyond the confines of the mess hall. Every gesture, every glance, every subtle shift of her posture conveyed expertise and authority. Then, as though sensing the 3 recruits' lingering questions, she leaned forward slightly and spoke softly, her voice calm but carrying unmistakable weight. "Underestimating someone based on appearance is dangerous," she said, her eyes locked on the tallest recruit, "especially when you have no idea what they've been through." The impact of her words was immediate. The tallest recruit felt the full weight of embarrassment and fear pressing down on him. He knew she wasn't speaking metaphorically. She was reminding him that life, discipline, and experience were measured not by size, confidence, or noise, but by skill, control, and mental fortitude. The youngest recruit, voice barely above a whisper, finally muttered, We have no idea who she really is." She smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. It wasn't a victory smile, but it was a signal that she had been noticed and recognized on her own terms. She didn't need to prove herself beyond what she had already done. Every action had already communicated her capabilities more than words ever could. At that moment, one of the other recruits, braver or perhaps more curious than the rest, approached cautiously. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, voice shaky. "Are you a SEAL?" The woman didn't answer immediately. She paused, letting the words hang in the air like a suspended breath. Then she nodded slightly, deliberately. It was confirmation without pride, without arrogance, just a simple acknowledgement of truth. The mess hall seemed to collectively exhale. Whispers erupted again, louder this time, as the other recruits processed what had been revealed. The three men who had tried to corner her now felt the full impact of their mistake. They had tested someone at a level far beyond their comprehension, and they had been humbled in a way they would never forget. One of them, voice low and trembling, admitted, We really messed up." The woman's gaze shifted back to her tray, and she picked up her fork, taking a deliberate bite of eggs she hadn't touched earlier. It was a reminder that life went on, that chaos could be controlled, and that composure was its own weapon. She had delivered a lesson, and now it was time to resume the ordinary, all while maintaining the extraordinary. For the three recruits, though, ordinary had been shattered. Every muscle in their bodies was tense, every thought focused on understanding the woman before them. How could one person, so seemingly quiet, neutralize three men with such precision? How could someone command respect without raising a hand in anger? They had witnessed a force beyond their understanding. Her eyes flicked toward the exit, then back to the three men. There was a subtle challenge in her gaze. Acknowledge your misjudgment, respect skill, or remain trapped in ignorance. The choice, as always, was theirs. She stood, straightening her uniform, every fold crisp, every insignia gleaming. The three recruits barely dared to breathe. She walked toward the door, each step measured, each movement radiating authority. The room seemed to lean in with her, every eye following her, every breath suspended in anticipation. As she disappeared from view, the whispers swelled. "She's incredible," someone murmured. "A real seal." The three recruits left behind sat frozen. Pride, embarrassment, and awe mingled in a chaotic storm inside them. They realized, finally, that they had encountered someone extraordinary, someone whose presence alone could command respect and fear. And they knew that this was only the beginning. Outside the mess hall, the woman paused for a moment, glancing back over her shoulder. Her faint, knowing smile hinted at the challenges still ahead. For the three recruits and for everyone else watching, the revelation had only just begun. They had seen her skill, but they had no idea of the missions, the dangers, and the experiences that shaped her into the force of nature she had become. And somewhere deep in her mind, she was already planning her next move, one that would test not just skill, but courage, loyalty, and survival itself. The mess hall had returned to something resembling routine, though the air was heavy with tension, an unspoken acknowledgement that the morning's events had changed everything. Diners shuffled trays quietly, conversations reduced to murmurs. Some recruits pretended not to notice the woman in the corner, but every few seconds, eyes flicked toward her. Even from across the hall, it was impossible to ignore her presence. There was a gravity about her, a quiet authority that made ordinary soldiers feel small. The three recruits sat frozen at their table, their earlier bravado shattered. The tallest rubbed his arm, still smarting from the twisting motion she had used on him. The second fidgeted with his tray, while the youngest kept staring, wide-eyed and pale. All three struggled to process what had happened. She's not human," the youngest whispered, his voice trembling. "I've never seen anyone move like that." The tallest let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, human, that's the problem. She's something else. A seal, a real one. There's no other explanation." The second recruit nodded slowly, swallowing. "We thought we were in control. We thought we could handle it, but she didn't even break a sweat. Every move was perfect." Their words were tinged with awe and fear. They realized that what they had assumed was a harmless prank, a moment of casual intimidation, had been a catastrophic misjudgment. In less than a minute, she had demonstrated a mastery of skill, control, and psychological dominance that left them humbled, shaking, and painfully aware of their own naivety. Meanwhile, the woman remained calm. She picked up her tray, brushed crumbs off her uniform with deliberate care, and began to eat quietly. Her calmness was almost intimidating in its serenity, a sharp contrast to the chaos she had caused just moments ago. She wasn't boasting. She wasn't angry. She was simply present, fully aware of her surroundings and completely in control. A few recruits who had been observing from across the hall began whispering among themselves. "Did you see that?" one asked. "She didn't even try to hurt them. She just neutralized them." "Yeah," another replied. "And the way she moves, it's like she's anticipating everything before it happens. It's insane." The three recruits at the table could only nod, their pride thoroughly dismantled. Every instinct, every assumption they had about strength, intimidation, and control had been proven useless. They were not just beaten in skill, they were outclassed, outmaneuvered, and outthought. For a moment the tallest recruit looked around, hopping for some form of reassurance from his peers, some affirmation that what he had witnessed was an anomaly. But there was none. Everyone in the hall had seen it, everyone had felt it, and no one could deny the truth. This woman was extraordinary. She ate deliberately, slowly, without a word, as if nothing had happened. But every subtle motion was a lesson in itself. The way she held herself, the way she controlled her breathing, even the calm way she chewed her food, all of it spoke of discipline, precision, and mental fortitude. The three recruits watched, envious and humbled. They realized that her calm after the storm was more powerful than any physical demonstration she had displayed. The lesson was clear. Control, poise, and presence were as lethal as any technique, any maneuver, any strike. A few diners finally dared to break the silence. Phones were cautiously raised, capturing snippets of the scene, though most kept a safe distance, wary of attracting attention. The woman did not flinch, did not even glance at the cameras. She was unfazed by observation, as though she had faced scrutiny far greater than any civilian audience could muster. The youngest recruit leaned toward the others, whispering, We need to know who she really is. We need to understand what we just saw." The tallest shook his head, voice low. Don't even try. Whatever you think she is, you can't imagine it, and if we press, we might regret it." Even as they spoke, the woman's eyes flicked up subtly, scanning their table. She was aware of their conversation, of course. She had always been aware, but she didn't interrupt. She allowed them the dignity of realizing their mistake without confrontation. The lesson had been delivered, and that was enough. For the rest of breakfast, the three recruits remained silent, consumed by reflection. Their earlier arrogance had been completely stripped away, replaced by a profound understanding of their own limitations. They had faced someone at the pinnacle of skill, someone who embodied discipline, precision, and deadly calm. They had tested her, and in doing so, they had glimpsed a level of mastery few would ever encounter. Outside the mess hall, the woman paused, letting the morning light fall on her face. She took a deep breath, the kind of controlled inhale that suggested preparation, focus, and anticipation. Her mind was already moving forward, calculating what the next moments might bring. She was aware of lingering tensions in the barracks, subtle power dynamics among the recruits, and the quiet potential for conflict. But she did not fear it. She had faced far greater challenges, far more dangerous situations, and she had emerged unscathed every time. Inside the hall, whispers continued. Some recruits speculated wildly about her identity. A few guessed instructor. Others suggested a decorated veteran. Few dared approach her. Most were content to observe from a distance, captivated and intimidated by her presence. The three recruits remained at their table, finally finding their voices in fragmented murmurs. We underestimated her," the tallest admitted. "Completely. I don't even know how to fix this." The second nodded. "We can't, we just have to accept it." The youngest shivered. I don't even know if I should talk to her again. I think I'd just freeze." She watched them, her gaze quiet but all-encompassing. She did not scold. She did not gloat. She had delivered the lesson with precision and efficiency, and now she allowed the three to process the gravity of their misjudgment. It was a lesson in humility, discipline, and respect, lessons far more enduring than any words could provide. As the breakfast hour ended, the mess hall began to clear. Soldiers filed out, trays clattering, voices rising again. The woman finished her food calmly, stood, and gathered her tray. Her movements were effortless, her presence commanding yet unobtrusive. The three recruits watched her leave, each lost in thought. They had faced a force they could not challenge, a mastery they could not comprehend, and an authority that demanded respect. The experience had left them shaken, humbled, and forever changed. Even after she left, her influence lingered. Conversations around the hall revolved around her. Recruits speculated about her missions, her background, and the incredible skill she had displayed. Some admired her silently, others feared her openly, but all acknowledged that they had witnessed something extraordinary, someone who embodied excellence, control, and deadly precision. Unbeknownst to the three recruits, the woman's presence in the mess hall had been just a small fragment of her day. Outside, an urgent message awaited her, a mission that would test every ounce of her training, every shred of her mental fortitude. The encounter with the recruits had been a distraction, a prelude. The real challenge was coming, and it would push her further than any mess hall confrontation ever could. The mess hall emptied slowly, leaving behind the faint smell of eggs, burnt toast, and lingering tension. Most recruits had scattered, retreating to dorms, training grounds, or briefings, but a small cluster of observers lingered, whispering in hushed tones. The three recruits who had tried to corner her sat frozen at their table, still processing the revelation. Outside, the late morning sunlight reflected off the barracks windows, casting long, sharp lines across the parade grounds. The woman walked with deliberate strides, her uniform pristine, every insignia gleaming in the light. Her movements were smooth, fluid, and purposeful, each step measured, as though even her gait had been trained to convey control and confidence. She had completed countless missions, some known, many classified, in environments more hostile than any mess hall prank could replicate. Jungle operations, high-risk extractions, underwater demolitions. She had faced danger in every conceivable form and had survived by mastering every nuance of her body, mind, and surroundings. The calmness she displayed now was not an act. It was honed instinct. Every flicker of movement in her peripheral vision, every subtle shift of sound in the environment was cataloged and processed, ready for instant response. The three recruits followed her mentally as she moved, though none dared physically. They whispered among themselves, their voices low and hesitant. "Do you think she's seen combat?" the youngest asked, almost afraid of the answer. "She has," the tallest replied, tone subdued, almost reverent. "And I bet the mess hall incident was nothing. She's been tested in ways we can't even imagine." Even among her peers, whispers of her reputation circulated. Some knew her as disciplined beyond measure, a relentless operator who had survived missions most could only read about in classified reports. Others merely observed her calm presence, recognizing instinctively that she was someone to be respected, even feared. The woman paused briefly at the edge of the barracks, glancing back toward the mess hall. Her eyes flickered, not with concern but with awareness, a quiet assessment of residual tension. The three recruits, still seated, avoided her gaze, though they could feel the weight of it pressing down on them. She didn't need to confront them. Her mere presence reminded them of the gulf that separated ordinary soldiers from those at the pinnacle of elite training. She took a deep breath, controlled and deliberate, and allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Beneath her calm exterior, countless experiences shaped her. Every mission, every close call, every decision made under extreme pressure had built her into this moment, into the woman who had effortlessly neutralized three men in the mess hall without raising her voice or spilling a drop of her composure. Her mind, however, was never idle. Even as she reflected, she was already calculating, planning, anticipating. There were subtle tensions among the recruits that could escalate, and while none posed an immediate threat, she cataloged their behavior, noting potential patterns, weaknesses, and temperaments. The smallest recruit's arrogance had been neutralized, but pride is a persistent danger. If left unchecked, it could create unnecessary complications in training exercises or missions. She continued walking, her eyes scanning the environment. The barracks themselves were quiet, a deceptive calm that could mask a threat if one was not vigilant. Even routine drills could become dangerous if attention wavered, and she had long ago trained herself to notice the smallest anomalies: sounds, shadows, posture, facial microexpressions, all data points in an ever-expanding mental map of risk and response. Her phone vibrated subtly in her pocket, the alert drawing her attention. She pulled it out carefully, glancing at the screen. The message was terse, urgent, and immediate. A new mission assignment had arrived, one that would test her skill, strategy, and mental endurance to the extreme. Her jaw tightened imperceptibly. She had anticipated challenges that day, but nothing could fully prepare her for the speed at which this new directive demanded action. The three recruits, still inside the mess hall, had no idea that their brief encounter had been a prelude to far greater responsibilities she now faced. They had seen only a fraction of her skill, only a hint of her capability. What lay ahead involved danger, unpredictability, and life-or-death decisions, the likes of which none of them would witness firsthand. She made her way to a quiet corner of the barracks, pulling out a notebook and reviewing the mission details. Every detail was analyzed meticulously: risks, contingencies, environmental variables, personnel involved, and extraction routes. Her years of experience had taught her that preparation was as critical as execution, and her mind raced ahead, simulating every possible scenario with precision. Even as she planned, her awareness of the recruits' earlier behavior lingered. The memory of their arrogance, their sudden panic, and their whispered reactions served as a reminder of human nature: flawed, impulsive, and predictable. She cataloged their reactions not for retribution but for understanding, learning who could be relied upon, who needed guidance, and who required strict discipline. As she reviewed the mission, she adjusted her posture, her breathing, and her mental focus. Years of high-stakes operations had trained her to maintain equilibrium under pressure, to remain calm even when confronted with chaos. The ability to center herself, to control her body and mind, was the difference between success and failure. Outside, the sunlight was beginning to wane, shadows lengthening across the grounds. Her shadow stretched long and leaned behind her as she moved, a visual reminder of the presence and influence she carried. To any observer, she might have seemed serene, even delicate. But beneath that exterior lay a coiled strength, a mind always calculating, always prepared, always 3 steps ahead. The three recruits finally left the mess hall, walking in silence, heads down, weighed down by the enormity of their earlier mistake. Their thoughts circled the same realization. They had faced someone extraordinary, a master of skill, psychology, and precision. And even now, as they processed the encounter, they had no idea that the woman's attention was already shifting to a far more dangerous horizon. She paused at the edge of the barracks once more, glancing toward the horizon. The mission ahead would challenge her limits. It would demand every ounce of skill, every shred of courage, every decision honed through years of survival and elite training. And yet she did not hesitate. Confidence, precision, and preparation were her armor. Calm, her weapon. Awareness, her shield. The first text had only hinted at the danger to come. As she reviewed the full details of the operation, her eyes narrowed. This mission was unlike any she had faced in recent months. High stakes, unpredictable outcomes, and lives dependent on her decisions. And somewhere in the shadows of the barracks, the three recruits would soon realize that their brief encounter with her had been only a small taste of what it meant to face someone truly unstoppable. The sun was dipping low, casting long, jagged shadows across the barracks grounds. The crisp air carried a hint of smoke from nearby training exercises, the scent mingling with the faint tang of metal and dust. Inside the operations room, the woman stood over a digital map, eyes scanning satellite imagery and operational notes. Every detail mattered. Entry points, escape routes, security gaps, timing of patrols, and variables that could shift in seconds. Her fingers traced lines of movement across the screen, anticipating every outcome with cold precision. Outside, the three recruits lingered near the edge of the training field, whispers still escaping between them. Fear and fascination had fused into annoying anxiety. "Do you think she's going to be deployed tonight?" the youngest asked, voice barely audible. The tallest shook his head. "If she is, I can't even imagine. She's different. What we saw this morning, that was a fraction. We weren't ready and we'll never be ready." The second recruit, eyes wide, muttered, "I don't even want to think about it. She's a SEAL. Full stop. Whatever she does next, we can't touch it. We just survive by watching." They didn't know it yet, but the day was far from over. The woman had been summoned for a high-risk, time-sensitive operation, a mission that demanded stealth, precision, and adaptability beyond ordinary limits. She had been briefed just hours earlier, and now, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the countdown had begun. She checked her gear with meticulous care, each piece of equipment placed deliberately, each weapon cleaned, loaded, and ready. The hum of the operations room was a muted backdrop to her internal rhythm, controlled, steady, unwavering. She had faced countless life-or-death scenarios, and every action now was part of a well-rehearsed pattern honed over years of elite training. As night settled, she slipped into the shadows, moving with a fluid grace that rendered her almost invisible. The three recruits watched from a distance, frozen in awe and fear. Even at this separation, they could feel the tension radiating from her movements, the quiet authority, the unwavering confidence, the subtle precision. Her mission was to intercept a high-value target believed to be operating in a remote, heavily guarded facility. Intelligence suggested potential threats at every turn: patrols, surveillance systems, and unpredictable environmental hazards. But to her, this was just another challenge, another puzzle to solve with skill, observation, and adaptability. The first steps onto the terrain were silent, each footfall measured, precise, controlled. She melted into the darkness, shadows embracing her as naturally as the night itself. Every sound, every light source, every environmental factor was analyzed instantly. Her mind simulated outcomes faster than thought, every variable accounted for, every contingency planned. The three recruits, hidden behind trees at the perimeter, tried to follow, but even they struggled to keep pace. Her movements were fluid, almost otherworldly, a rhythm perfected through years of life-or-death training. Even under their closest scrutiny, she was untouchable, an enigma wrapped in shadow, calm as a predator on the hunt. Inside the facility, alarms and security cameras posed the first obstacles. Her approach was careful, deliberate, using shadows, walls, and natural cover to move unseen. Her hands worked with mechanical precision, disabling cameras and bypassing locks without leaving a trace. Every movement was silent but deadly in its intent, calculated to minimize exposure while maximizing efficiency. The high-value target was inside a secure room, unaware of her presence. Her approach was unhurried but unstoppable. Every second mattered, every step critical. She paused, listening to the environment, reading patterns, observing subtle shifts in the guard's behavior. In that moment, patience and awareness were more powerful than any weapon. The three recruits watched from a distance, mouths dry, hearts racing. She's unstoppable," the youngest whispered. "Look at how she moves, like she owns the night." The tallest nodded, unable to speak. Every instinct screamed that interfering was not only foolish but potentially fatal. They were spectators to an extraordinary display of skill, discipline, and control, something they could never hope to replicate. Inside the facility, the woman reached her target. A single, precise maneuver neutralized the guards without detection, leaving the path clear. Her eyes scanned the room, confirming that the objective was secure. Time was critical, and yet every action remained deliberate, controlled, precise. She retrieved the intelligence and slipped into the shadows again, retracing her steps with equal care. Every exit strategy had been calculated in advance, every potential hazard anticipated. She moved like a phantom, unseen, unstoppable, lethal without raising a hand to cause harm. The recruits followed from a safe distance, hearts pounding, unable to tear their eyes away. The scene was surreal, a real-life demonstration of elite skill, strategy, and composure, all unfolding before them like a masterclass in controlled chaos. As she exited the facility, a sudden alert sounded, unexpected patrols approaching. Without hesitation, she adapted, every movement recalculated in real time. Shadows, terrain, timing, even the sound of the patrol's footsteps were accounted for as she melted into the darkness, leaving no trace. It was a dance of survival and precision, executed flawlessly. The recruits, overwhelmed, could barely comprehend the scene. "We'll never be able to do that," the second whispered, voice shaking. "Not in a million years." The youngest swallowed hard. She's more than anyone we've ever seen. She's perfect at this." The tallest shook his head, silent for a moment, then muttered, "Perfect doesn't even begin to cover it. She's unstoppable." Hours later, the mission concluded. She returned to base with the intelligence secured, no alarms triggered, no one harmed unnecessarily. Her presence was a ghost, her impact absolute. The three recruits, exhausted from following her from a distance, sat in stunned silence, processing what they had witnessed. It wasn't just her physical skill that left them in awe. It was her mental acuity, her calm under pressure, her ability to anticipate, adapt, and execute flawlessly. The entire mission had been a live demonstration of elite-level mastery, a performance that few soldiers would ever witness in their lifetimes. Back in the barracks, she debriefed quietly, analyzing every detail, every contingency, every variable that could be improved. Even in victory, she was methodical, disciplined, and focused. The three recruits lingered outside the operations room, still unsure if they should approach. Their minds were filled with questions, their curiosity battling fear, their admiration mingled with disbelief. Finally, as the woman stepped out, the tallest recruit spoke, voice trembling but firm. "Ma'am, can we learn from you? Even a little?" She paused, eyes assessing them, silent for a heartbeat that felt like eternity. Then her lips curved into the faintest smile. "If you're ready to put aside ego, arrogance, and fear, maybe. But the lesson isn't in watching. It's in understanding discipline, control, and respect, and applying it yourself." The three recruits nodded, swallowing the weight of her words. They had witnessed a force beyond their comprehension, had seen skill, strategy, and mastery executed in real time, and had come face to face with the consequences of arrogance. The lesson was seared into their minds, unforgettable and humbling. As the night deepened, she looked out over the training grounds, shadows stretching long beneath the moonlight. The next mission loomed, more complex, more dangerous, and far more unpredictable. And somewhere in the darkness, the three recruits understood, with a shiver that ran to their bones, that they had only glimpsed the beginning of what it meant to face someone truly unstoppable. Night had fully descended, cloaking the base in darkness, broken only by the faint glow of floodlights along the perimeter. The air was sharp with anticipation, carrying the faint scent of pine and dust from training grounds long abandoned for the night. Inside the operations room, the woman stood over a table illuminated by soft lamplight, reviewing her next assignment. Every detail mattered, every route, every contingency, every unknown variable. There was no room for error, no margin for hesitation. The previous day's encounter in the mess hall, the mission that followed, and the silent observation of the three recruits had been nothing compared to the challenge now waiting. Intelligence had flagged a high-risk target planning an imminent operation. The stakes were higher than anything she had faced in recent months. Civilian lives, national security, and her own team depended on flawless execution. Her movements were calm, deliberate. Every muscle, every nerve, every thought synchronized with precision honed over years of grueling training. Years spent in grueling SEAL programs, in hostile environments, and in near-impossible scenarios had built her into the embodiment of control, awareness, and lethal efficiency. Nothing could break her composure. Nothing could disrupt the rhythm she had mastered. Outside the operations room, the three recruits lingered. Their curiosity had overcome fear, though awe and intimidation still chained them. They had witnessed her skill, her discipline, and her intelligence, but even they could not anticipate the storm they were about to witness. They whispered among themselves, their voices taut with anticipation. "She's unstoppable," the youngest said, voice trembling. "I've never seen anyone move like that, not in training, not in simulations, not ever." The tallest nodded solemnly. "It's more than skill. It's control, awareness, discipline, everything combined. We were fools to think we could test her." The second recruit swallowed hard, eyes wide. "And now, whatever she's about to do, it's real. This isn't practice. This isn't a drill. People could die if she fails." The woman stepped away from the table, slipping into her gear with the quiet efficiency of someone who had performed this countless times. Weapons secured, communication lines checked, tactical routes memorized, every sensor on the field accounted for. She was ready, though to the casual observer, she simply appeared composed, methodical, and unassuming. The difference between appearance and reality had always been her greatest weapon. As she exited the operations room, the base seemed to shift around her. The night air felt electric, charged with tension and anticipation. Her footsteps were silent on the concrete, yet each movement radiated power and purpose. Even from a distance, the three recruits could sense it, the aura of someone entirely in control, someone whose presence alone demanded respect. The target facility loomed ahead, a compound shrouded in darkness, heavily monitored with multiple patrols, cameras, and barriers. Each element of risk had been calculated, and yet she remained vigilant, aware that unpredictable factors could arise at any moment. Her mind ran simulations in real time, adapting contingencies with lightning speed. Every patrol pattern, every shift in shadows, every environmental factor was assessed, cataloged, and integrated into her strategy. The operation began with the fluid grace of a predator stalking prey. She moved through shadows, timing her approach with meticulous care. Cameras were neutralized, alarms bypassed, and patrols evaded, each action executed with the precision of a machine tempered by instinct and experience. Every movement was deliberate, every decision instantaneous, every outcome anticipated. Inside the facility, the high-value target moved unaware of her presence. A single misstep could trigger disaster, yet she advanced with confidence, precision, and lethal calm. Guards were neutralized quietly, a combination of swift technique and psychological control that left no evidence, no witnesses, and no chance for resistance. The three recruits watched from their distant vantage point, holding their breath. Even hidden, they felt the tension, the invisible pull of skill and authority radiating from her. The youngest muttered under his breath, "It's like watching a ghost, a trained, unstoppable ghost." The tallest whispered, "We don't get it. We can't even imagine the hours of training, the missions she's faced. This isn't just talent. This is mastery of every sense, every thought, every reaction." Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as she maneuvered through the facility. Every step calculated, every decision precise, every risk accounted for. Yet she remained adaptable, fluid, and unbroken. The situation demanded not just physical skill but mental acuity, the ability to anticipate and neutralize threats that could not be predicted in advance. Finally, she reached the inner chamber where the target was located. Her movements were silent, her presence unnoticed. With a combination of tactical skill and psychological control, she secured the target, neutralizing potential threats without unnecessary force. The intelligence she retrieved could prevent a disaster, protect countless lives, and alter the course of operations significantly. As she retraced her steps, new patrols emerged unexpectedly. Her mind adapted instantly, recalculating, predicting, and executing maneuvers that kept her hidden and the mission intact. Every shadow, every movement, every sound was part of a mental map she had constructed and perfected. By the time she exited the compound, no alarms had been triggered, no one had been harmed, and the operation had been executed flawlessly. The three recruits could hardly believe what they had witnessed. Even from a distance, the precision, skill, and calm composure were breathtaking. The youngest whispered, She just did all that and no one even knew." The tallest shook his head slowly, the reality settling in. "And that's why she's a SEAL, not because she fights, not because she trains, because she controls. She controls everything, situations, people, herself. That's power." Back at the base, the woman debriefed efficiently, cataloging every detail, every success, and every potential improvement. Even in triumph, she remained methodical, disciplined, and focused. Her calm was unshakable, her confidence rooted in preparation, skill, and experience. She had faced danger, adapted in real time, and emerged victorious without chaos or compromise. The three recruits finally approached her, hesitantly, still in awe. "Ma'am," the tallest said, voice low, we just watched something incredible. We don't even know how to thank you or respect you properly." She studied them quietly, her gaze piercing yet calm. Respect isn't given because of fear. It's earned through discipline, humility, and integrity. Today, you saw a fraction of what training and experience create. Take that lesson. Learn it. Apply it. That is how you earn respect and survival. The youngest, voice trembling, asked, Do you ever fail?" A faint, controlled smile crossed her face. "Failure is an option only if you let it be. Preparation, awareness, and adaptability minimize it, but you must always respect the possibility. That respect keeps you sharp, keeps you alive." The second recruit swallowed, eyes wide. We want to learn, even a little." Her gaze softened subtly, acknowledging their humility. "Then start by understanding yourselves. Discipline, control, awareness, and above all, humility. Skill without humility is danger, both to yourself and others." As she walked away, the three recruits remained, their minds racing. They had been spectators to mastery, efficiency, and calm in the face of danger. They had witnessed someone who was unstoppable not just because of training, but because of mental fortitude, strategic brilliance, and control of every variable. And they understood, with a mixture of awe, fear, and admiration, that their own growth depended on applying even a fraction of what they had seen. Later that night, as the base slept under a blanket of moonlight, the woman stood atop a ridge overlooking the training grounds. Shadows stretched across the land, and in the distance, new challenges awaited, more complex, more dangerous, and less predictable than anything yet faced. But she remained calm, prepared, and unstoppable. For the three recruits and anyone who had witnessed her, the lesson was clear. Power, control, and mastery were forged not in moments of display, but in a lifetime of preparation, and she was living proof. The night held a quiet promise. The storm had passed, but the real test of courage, discipline, and human will was only beginning. And for those who had seen her that day, nothing would ever be the same again.